Sweat gland. Sweat gland, and we know that it has an important function is that thermoregulation. It is having a simple coiled tubular gland with a lot of secretory ducts, and that is very simple coiled gland. So gland is distributed widely and most numerously. Wait a minute, I will just stop. Okay, sorry for interruption. There was a lot of noise outside. That's why he's saying that. Glands are widely distributed and they are very much numerous in the soul and in the palm. That's why whenever we have exam, we know that what's waiting and why they get cold. Almost 620 per meter square. Collectively, almost 3 million eccrine glands or sweat glands are there. And that's why it plays an important role in water balance and basically the electrolyte balance. So if required, the sweat can be secreted almost 10 liters per day, almost twice of our blood volume. That's why when a lot of sweat is there, we get a lot of fatigue. We have to take care of that. Whenever we talk about the last month was the May, when there was a lot of heat, we will talk about the heat stroke. So we have to think about this, why water electrolytes are essential for us. Structure of the sweat gland, if you see, if you take a section of the sweat gland, if I take these coil structures in the section, what I will see is small coils I can see. So this is how I can see small lumen under the histological section. And then in this way, I will see the cells. There are two different types of cells. One is pale cells, which has major secretion of the what we call it as the fluid or electrolytes. We have to remember these pale cells, they are not connecting to the lumen. They are below the lumen. That is what we have to remember. Clear cells, they are also called clear cells. They are near the periphery. Secretion has to come between this, that is called canalicula. I will show the TEM microscope, and then the later on this secretion moves into the ear canal. And then these other cells which are seen near the lumen, they are called the so they secrete to the canaliculi. Watery secretion from the pill cell. They are the contain sodium, chloride, urea, uric acid, and ammonia. See, these are the things: sodium, chloride. That is the loss, urea, uric acid, and ammonia. Sometimes we may get if somebody's mic is on. Please look into that. Large quantity of loss. If there is a large quantity of loss of the fluid, what happens? There is a loss of potassium and magnesium. And that is the reason whenever there is a lot of sweat, we always think about potassium and magnesium apart from the sodium. So that these are the important contents of usually of our electrolytes. That is what we have to see. See now in this figure, you can see the cells, clear cells which are below and away from the lumen, and they have a canaliculi. So secretion goes in the canaliculi. Later on, canaliculi connects to the lumen, and darker cells will be near the canaliculi. And in the darker cells, you can see there is the vacuoles which is filled with. That indicates that they are having a more proteinous secretion. So the first type of cell seen in the sweat gland is clear cell. Second is the dark cells. They are usually more near to the lumen. They have secretion, more mucoid secretion, contains glycoprotein granules, which helps in the immunity. They are bactericidal inactive. They are bactericidal inactivity. And then, as we have seen there, these all glands are lined by myoepithelial cells, indicating that myoepithelial cells means they squeeze the gland so that the secretion comes out. So if you see the histological section, we just go back, can you see these are the myoepithelial cells? So three types of cells inside: clear cell, then dark cell, and the myoepithelial cell. That is what you have to remember. And apart from this, sweat gland ducts, they have to pass. If you see the first figure, see the sweat gland is in the dermis. Duct has to pass partially through the dermis and then through the epidermis, and ultimately comes on the skin surface. So the duct has been divided into two. One duct has a small coil structure, small lumen, stratified. This is what you have to remember. This is a place where you get a stratified cuboidal epithelium. So ducts have stratified cuboidal epithelium. This will be, we will be again seeing stratified cuboidal when we talk about the salivary gland ducts also. The part of the duct which is dermal, it is called syrinx, or syrinx, or also tumor of this duct is called syringomas. That is a word which is usually asked in mid PG. Syringomas are associated with, you have to remember, it is associated with sweat gland. Sweat gland tumors, especially duct tumors, especially related with the dermal part of the duct. Then second is epidermal part, acroneum. Also, the tumor of this is called pyomas. The tumor of this is called poromas. Sorry, it is called the poromas. So these are the two terms which we have to remember about the sweat gland duct. Duct of eccrine sweat gland, it is not a passive. It helps in adding absorbing the sodium with the help of potassium ATPase. It helps in the absorption of extra amount of sodium in normal process by sodium potassium ATPase channel. These ducts absorb sodium ion and prevents excessive loss of electrolyte whenever there is a normal process, perspiration, or we say the skin loss of the fluid. Sweat glands, eccrine sweat glands, physiological response of physical exercises, thermal stress. This you can add as a function, physical exercise, thermal stress, and even most effective means of temperature regulation. So this is a function you can see very clearly in the figure, ducts, which is showing the stratified cuboidal epithelium. Sweat glands also function as auxiliary excretory organ. Why it is called? Because it secretes some amount of urea, uric acid, and ammonia. That's why it is also called auxiliary excretory organ. So which is auxiliary excretory organ? Is a sweat gland. Cholinergics are basically secreted by sympathetic. This is something different. Sweat glands are cholinergic, means acetylcholine control. It is under the sympathetic control. That is what you have to remember. One of the conditions which are associated with cholinergics is hyperhidrosis. Hyperhidrosis. Anyone is having echo? Please not mute. Please see. It is called hyperhidrosis. This is a term what we can use. This is very much has been tested at various places. If I get a lot of sweat, which may disturb my function, it is called hyperhidrosis. Now, with this, we will move to the apocrine gland. Apocrine glands are again the modified sweat glands, but they are present usually in axilla or perineal region. Then there are glands in the ear which gives a lot of wax. This is called cremininous glands or ceruminous glands. Ceruminous glands are present in external ear. They are again a modified sweat gland. That is what we have to remember. Glands of mole of the eyelashes. They are also modified sweat glands. So we are going to see an eyelash. There are various modification of gland, modification of sebaceous gland and a sweat gland. Sweat gland is a modification in the eyelash, especially it's apocrine type, have more thick secretion. This is a gland of mole. Here, what is the difference in sweat gland and apocrine? In apocrine gland, they have milky proteinous secretion having usually only single type of cell. That is what we have to remember. Slightly more proteinous, they are adrenergic. So this is again a difference. Two different single type of cell. There it is the two types of cell. More secretion is proteinous in apocrine. There it is more of a fluid. Sweat glands are under the control of acetylcholine, and apocrine glands are under the control of epinephrine and norepinephrine. That is adrenergic. Applied of epidermis, just put it a special branch which deals with all of the skin is called dermatology. It's a very big branch and has a lot of what you call those career options. Then another is especially deals with the surgical wounds or burns, superficial and deep. Superficial burns, because the free nerve endings are opened up, are more painful compared to the deep burns. Exfoliative dermal diseases, that is whole branch which deals with the different types of, like from the dandruff to the variety of the diseases. Exfoliative dermal diseases, fungal infections which goes throughout the life, and it has a lot of things to do with the various type of environment, especially in rainy seasons. We may get more of fungal infection. Carcinomas, especially when there is a concept comes of the ozone hole, ultraviolet exposure, and variety of the things. That is usually a basal cell carcinoma. The variety of carcinomas we have seen. So one of the commonest is basal cell carcinoma. Only thing is that if it is identified earlier, can be treated very easily, can save the life. The branch which deals with the dermal ridges, that is what we call dermatoglyphs. So if you have applied importance on the skin. Now another thing, most important, we day to day we feel it. That is the wound healing. So see, what is wound healing? This is what we are going to deal throughout our life. So just few terms you remember about wound healing. Two types of wounds we usually call. Wound by primary intention, that is maybe a surgical wound or clear cut wound like a glass cutting the skin. We can suture it because it is clear, it is not contaminated. So usually it is called wound healed by primary intention. And this wound healed by primary intention, then there is secondary intention means we get a crush injuries of the skin. There is lot of dirt and everything is contaminating the skin. This secondary intention wound we never go for stitching. We usually keep it open like a dog bite. It is maybe infected with the rabies. So we have to keep it open up and let it heal by scarring. That is the difference. So two words, wound healing, primary intention, and secondly, we are going to deal this in great detail in pathology and a separate chapter itself. Mitotic activity usually starts in the healing of the skin around 24 hours. Rate of growth of this and healing is around 0.5 millimeters per day. That is an average healing growth because if it delays, maybe some metabolic disorder or maybe the infection which is not allowing you to heal. That is what we have to keep as a clinician in mind. And ultimately, when this epidermis comes beneath the scab, ultimately the scab, which is collection of the fibrinoids, this one will be thrown out. That is what the common day we find it. Now, with this, we will move to the modification of the skin and few part, that is oral cavity. Why oral cavity? What is oral cavity will be having? Any idea? It will having a stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Why stratified? Reason is that oral cavity may get a raw food. We have to chew it. There is a lot of friction. So right from oral cavity up to the upper one third of esophagus, that is what we have to remember. Epithelium is stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. This is a word what you have to always remember. Stratified squamous non-keratinized epithelium. Why it happens non-keratinized? That we will see when we talk about the lip. Lamina propria of this region having a lot of papillars. That is why the oral cavity can sense a soft food, a hard food, spiky food, and variety of things. Non-keratinized epithelium. You can see the epithelium on the soft palate and the hard palate, lips, cheeks, floor of the mouth. Because all this thing, why I'm giving emphasis, because we Indians are very much fond of gutka and chewing the tobacco, and we are on the highest risk. Indian population is the highest risk of oral carcinomas. So we have to keep in mind oral cavity and stratified squamous epithelium that can get converted to basal cell carcinomas. One of the thing. Another thing is some infection like papilloma virus infection also leads to oral carcinomas. So what we have to remember, a painless ulcer in the oral cavity. Remember, this is what painless ulcer in the oral cavity is more dangerous than the regular aphthous ulcer, which is painful. We have to be more careful for the painless ulcers. Diagnosis early, diagnose it early, take a biopsy, diagnose it early, it is very well treatable. That is what we have to keep in mind. And it is a big thing if somebody is thinking of maxillofacial surgery as a surgeon, oral carcinomas will be the one of the things they can earn a huge amount. Surface cells are shredded continuously, replaced by progeny of stem cells and organs. It's the same like the epithelium, almost have all the layers of epithelium, except that is what we are going to talk about. So this is slide. So try to see it carefully. So try to see it carefully. What do you see here? You see on one side hair follicles, some sebaceous glands, and the stratified squamous epithelium on the left side of the slide. Then there is change somewhere, a conical projection of change. This change is called Williams border, or this is the red of the lip. So this is a slide of a lip, shows the stratified squamous epithelium, all the characteristic feature of the skin, hair follicle, sebaceous gland. Then you see the junction where the epithelium is changing. Remember, epithelium, the skin of the lip is thinner compared to the epithelium of the mucosa, or that is inner side of the lip. Can you see this epithelium? It's quite thicker, but you don't see the hair follicle here. You don't see the sebaceous gland here. And between these two, we see the muscle layer, this middle muscle layer. Which muscle may be this? These are the muscles of the lip. That is what we call facial muscles of facial expression. That is what the muscle we call it as the muscle of facial expression. Which muscle will be this? This will be either orbicularis oris, or it will be levator palpebris superioris, or levator depressor palpebris, labia inferioris, and whatever. What it is a stride. These are the striated muscles. So they are interposed in the lip. So these are how we identify. On one side, I see all the characteristics of the skin. Other side, I see the mucosa, thick epidermis, or the mucosa. Then we see the striated muscle in the center. Then I see the hair follicle on one side, and I see the velamentous surface. Or we see this. That is what we call the red of the lip. This red of the lip is usually devoid of hair follicles. It has a lot of blood supply. That is what we will talk about. So lip, entry point of alimentary canal. Epithelium has skin type of epithelium, then vermilion border, that is the junction between the external epithelium, that is called red of the lip, and the mucosa. Stratified squamous epithelium, especially that is on the both side. One side it is keratinized, one side it is non-keratinized. Muscle, what is usually seen in this is the orbicularis oris. One word which I just want to make it, on the lateral side of the lip, we can see the thickening of the, and that is called the modulus. We call it now, that is a beauty sign dimple right on the side of the lip. That is basically where the muscles of oral cavity converge. They are joined there. That's why it is called modulus, also called as a dimple. From the side of the mucosa, we may get some amount of submucosal salivary. So these are 2 points. What you have to remember, when you see the low power lip, then we see the outer layer. Outer layer is a classical skin. We can see sebaceous gland. We can see all the epidermis, all the layers of epidermis, and we can see some dermal papilla. Not well defined dermal papilla. This outer layer of the lip, all characteristic of the skin. Stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. Who gives this stratified squamous keratinized?
Sir, you are not audible.
Surface of the lip, which is called red of the lip, which plays a variety of role, right from, I know, right from what we call as this is highly sensitive for tactile sensations. And for the highly sensitive for tactile sensation, see what happened here. See here there is the dermal papillas which are deep inside, and it is having the mucinous corpuscles, a highly dense mucinous corpuscles in the red of the lip. So the vermilion border layer is also called red of the lip, highly vascular and very tactile sensitive, very much a tactile sensitive. So what it does, thick layer of epidermis, red of lip, deep dermal papillas, that is second characteristic. You can see the mucinous corpuscles here. Good personal purposes will be seen here. This is all. And another thing, if you remember in CNS, lip is the other, has been represented in area number 312 after the thumb maximum, indicating that that is a maximum sensation. It started with the carnivores. When the carnivores catch the food, the type of food, and it has to be pulled back, the lip has been modified. It is highly sensitive. Another thing, even I might close my eyes, I know whatever food I'm putting in my mouth, is it soft? Is it semi-solid? Is it hard? and that gives the reflex action to rest of my function. What type of chewing I'm going to do, how I am going to hold the thing, and this all this thing is all dependent and nothing but most important. That is the reason in the sexual activity also, or we call it as love making. We always talk about the kissing. This gives a maximum sensations, sensual sensation. That is why the lip is utilized for that. Now you can go this good, highly represented in the cerebral. So that is called, and they can see a lot of variations in the red. So advantage, if the lip gets cut, it heals much faster. That is one thing. But disadvantage, it doesn't have much of the sebaceous gland and the sweat gland. So lips get cracked. That's why we have to search for a lot of things. I know nowadays because of mask we are not thinking about our lips, but yes, we do have to think about our lips, not for the only beauty but variety of the functional aspect. Then mucosal layer. See what happened. Here the epidermis is thinner. There is in mammalian border also is thinner, but as I go to the mucosa, the epidermis becomes thicker, much thicker. But what is going to be lost? See here the region is shown. Here in the vermic border, I have seen the stratum granulosum. As soon as I enter into the mucosa, stratum granulosum disappears. Inner side of the lip, stratum granulosum disappears. This thick layer of non-keratinized epithelium, and because granulosum stratum granulosum disappears, keratinization is not going to go ahead. Loss of glands and hair follicles, sudden loss of stratum granulosum, and that is an indication for the what we call it as, that is an indication for we call it as the, it is the mucosa. It is a shift of the mucosa, continues as a the mucosa. Applied importance, squamous cell carcinomas at the junction of the lip is one of the common thing, especially with the cigar smoking and other types of this one. And second is aphthous ulcers, which are very painful ulcers. And I already told you, the painless ulcer always has to be taken very seriously. Painless ulcers many times inside or in the junction are always most of the time in the carcinoma. So only thing is that diagnose it early before it crosses the epidermis. So the treatments will be wonderful. They are can be easily removed. One. Second thing, they are very sensitive to radiotherapy. They are very sensitive to the radiotherapy. So this is what we talked about the lip. Now we talk about the tongue. Tongue is extension of the oral cavity. You may have dealt with the sensation of the tongue. We will just briefly and we talk about the tongue. Tongue is a mass. Now what we have to remember? Even though the tongue is not what we call it as mus- they say that hold your tongue, don't talk too much. But remember, tongue is having a striated muscle layer. We talk about already in gross anatomy, we have taught about the intrinsic muscles of the tongue and extrinsic muscle of the tongue. We are more concerned today in histology is about the intrinsic muscles of the tongue, which are usually lying in three layers: horizontal, vertical, which use the movement of the tongue. It helps the tongue in right from the chewing, deglutition, and when we talk, we move our tongue for articulation. So it is a striated muscle, so very much under the control of the Broca's area. That is area number 44, 45. Otherwise, the surface or epithelium of the tongue is stratified, squamous, non-keratinized epithelium. That is what we have to remember. Stratified, squamous, non-keratinized epithelium. As we go ahead, muscle fibers crisscross the intrinsic muscles of the tongue, connective tissue of the tongue, which is much less, but it is there. They fill up the space. Some amount in the tongue we get some submucosal glands. Another, the mucous membrane of the tongue on the lower surface is smooth, but on the upper surface. That is what we have to remember. The mucous membrane on the dorsal surface of the tongue. We usually divide the tongue into anterior two-third and posterior one-third. We are more focusing today on the anterior two-third. Anterior two-third of the tongue shows elevations in the epidermis, and these elevations are called papillae. These are elevations which are called. This is a different concept than the dermal or epidermal papillae. Please remember, these are the elevations on the surface of the tongue, we call papillae. They are, and the posterior two-third tongue behind the sulcus terminalis will show the more of the lymphoid collection. Root of tongue shows many bulges, or that is called lingual tonsils. This is how we see the tongue: anterior two-third of the tongue, dorsal surface, posterior one-third of the tongue. Anterior two-third tongue, development-wise, develops from the lingual swelling. That is the most of the tongue. That's why it has a central groove, and it indicates right and left lingual swellings. Then tubercular impar, which has been submerged at this level forming foramen cecum, and then the third and the fourth arch, which merges to form the posterior one-third of the tongue and the epiglottis. What we are more concerned about this part. So this is coming from the lingual swelling, first arch. So the nerve supply is mandibular. So mandibular means lingual nerve. That is our sensation. Now if we try to see histologically, this rust surface is because of what? Because of elevations of epidermis. One, we see the conical elevations in the epidermis. We call them as filiform. They are numerous. They are basically directed upwards and backward, and they are devoid of taste buds. That is what you have to remember. They are numerous. They are conical in shape, usually directed upwards and backward, and they are why upwards and backward? Because in carnivorous animal, whenever the living thing has been catched, it should not easily slip out. So that's why upward and backward conical projections. In between this, we see certain elevation which shows the broad apical surface and narrow lower surface, like a mushroom, and that's why it is called fungiform papilla. So most of the surface of dorsal surface of the tongue, more concentrated near the tip, are fungiform papilla. And then we see another papillas on the side of the tongue, which shows a slight grooves and elevation, that is called follate papilla. On the side of the tongue, there will be follate papillas, and we can see almost by naked eyes a large grooved papillas and just in front of V-shaped groove. That is, you can maybe be able to see by the naked eye. We see here there's a difference. Is that these papillas are formed because of ingrowing of the epithelium and forming. So the surface or apical surface of this papilla doesn't project outside the tongue, and that is what we call as circumvallate papilla. Why circumvallate? Because there is a groove on the round side and there is some elevation, but that elevation will not cross the surface of the tongue. So three papillas can cross the surface of the tongue. That is filiform, fungiform, and follate. Only the papilla which doesn't go above the surface is circumvallate papilla. That is one thing. So we'll talk about one by one. Filiform papilla. You can see histologically very well you can identify them. A pointed structure and epithelium is going outside. They are called filiform papilla. So filiform papillas are very numerous, having elongated conical shape structure. Their epithelium lacks taste buds. Their role is mechanical in providing rough surface on the tongue. One of the thing, it is a condition called as bald tongue. Bald tongue means these filiform papillas are not there. There are a variety of conditions where we can develop bald, right from the malnutrition, right. It helps in the movement of the foot. It doesn't, and especially it is more important in carnivores and in humans, even though there are, but they are not very well developed. Then there is the fungiform papilla. See, the base is smaller and upper surface is broad. This is what we see usually at tip of the tongue more. And you can see in between this, these are the taste buds which are going up. These are the taste buds which are going up and coming to the surface. These are the taste buds. So this is what we call as fungiform papilla. These fungiform papillas are non-keratinized, mushroom-shaped connective tissue core. They are more numerous at the tip. They are present throughout the tongue on the dorsal surface, but more at the tip. The sensation it carries, and this more of the sweet test. Sweet test will be more related with the fungiform papillas. As we'll go ahead, the regular interspace, they are filiform papillas. This is how we can differentiate. These are the filiform papillas, these are fungiform. This is what we can see under the slide. Another papillas, which is seen on the lateral side of the tongue, which shows the groove, and you can see here the taste buds are laterally placed. Okay, but this is a projection on the surface. They are called folate papillas. Folate papillas are more concentrated on lateral surface. They're very well developed in adults, but as the age grows, they slowly goes down. Number goes down. The small kid, if around puberty, has maximum number. So they usually like the candies. They like usually the sour and salty things. Reason is that this folate papillas is this type of things, sour and salty, and that is what we know. We like it a lot, and we always test it. So these papillas are laterally placed. Anterolaterally, more of this will be related with the salty test, and posterolateral of the tongue will be more related with the sour test, and that's why we keep fear of the sour things or the candies or this thing on the lateral side of the tongue, and we get the best test on that. And another papilla which is a grooved inside. See, it goes below. See here, the epithelium is going up. Here, the epithelium is going down, just in front of V-shaped groove, and this is called circumvallate papilla. These are irregular. Diameter is 1 to 3 millimeters. That's why we may be able to see by the naked eyes 7 to 12 circumvallate papillas. These are near the posterior surface, and that is the reason two tests are related with here. One is bitter. Bitter is usually considered as the poisons may have a bitter taste. And that is why it is near the pharynx, so the gag reflex comes. So we know that if I take a bitter taste substance, what happens? That we try to throw it up. Okay? And that's why many times bitter substances will be given to the sweet things. One second thing is that there's less amount of sensation. Another sensation which comes from glutamates, that is the umami taste, and that is also related with circumvallate. Okay. So circumvallate papillas are posterior side. I can show you one more figure. And now circumvallate papillas are surrounded by some glands. These are the serous glands which are present. They are called von Ebner's gland. They are also called as the von Ebner's gland, which is near the circumvallate papilla, helps in dilution of the fluid and the test. So summarize: filiform papillas, fungiform papilla, folate papillas, and circumvallate. So we just shift to slightly about the test. This is what circumvallate looks like. Test buds are ovoid shaped structure. So what these structures have test buds. So what is basic structure of the test bud? There are around 50 to 70 test buds in each of this one. Cells in each of the test bud around. Out of this, there are gustatory or test cells. They are around they have a 7 to 10 days of lifespan. So they are not permanent. They have to be replaced. Supportive cells between the test buds are also there, and an immature stem. So three types of cells we will find in the test bud: gustatory cell, supportive cell, and basilar stem cell. I will show the figure to you. They are under the, you know that they are under the sensory sensation, spatial sensation. Chorda tympani is one of the nerve which helps in the test. That's a branch of the facial nerve. So test buds, you can see three types of cells. These are supportive cells, dark color. You can see the nerve end is coming in. This is going to the gustatory cells. Gustatory cells at apical surface show the villi. So gustatory show the small villi. So more surface area, they can take a test sensation. How the sensation is taken, we are going to discuss in short while now. So test bud, it take last 5 categories. So now, for more of a scientific way, salty is metal ions, that is sodium and chloride ions. Hydrogen ions, mole concentration is a sour test. That is, so two things are ion-based channels: sugar and related organic compounds with sweet, alkaloids and certain toxins with bitter. Alkaloids that indicates that yes, wines, good wines, and all those things have a slight amount of bitter taste. Amino acids, glutamates use the umami test. That is a carving for the proteins. Salty and sources are produced by ion channels. And the other tests, that is the sugar, alkaloids, and amino acids, and all these things requires a G protein coupled receptors. They require the G protein coupled receptors. So we'll see about this. So this is a nice figure. What you can see that the three tests which are G protein related this is the receptor. We call these receptors as T1R and T2R receptors, which are G protein coupled test receptors. Bitter test, whenever the bitter substance comes and hangs over here, the G proteins will get activated, and once they get activated, they have writing. So therefore, the bitter test, there are 30 different type of T2R receptors and chemoreceptors. Okay, umami test, which requires a umami test, which requires T1R1 and T1R3. These are the receptors which requires for umami. They both are present on the circumvallate papillas. That's why it came together. Both above are present on circumvallate papilla. What they do basically, once the G reactive protein starts, they make the sodium channel to leak away. And once the sodium has been, and then it stimulates ultimately the calcium channel. And once this calcium channel has been stimulated, another thing is sweet test. So sweet test requires, see, this is different. T1R2, here there's T1R1. This is same. So sweet test also G related or G protein related. Tip of the tongue, that is the folate, fungiform papillas. They stimulate all this. Once the G protein is stimulated, goes into inositol 1,4,5 triphosphate channels. And once the inositol IP3 gets stimulated, it increases the calcium channel, the calcium to come inside, creating depolarization. Once the depolarization is created, it's stimulated, the statary sensation. So these three sensations, bitter, umami, goes with circumvallate. Specific receptors are stimulated, then only the typical type of sensation will be created. All this thing is studied in great detail whenever we talk about various diseases of the tongue, as itself is a branch. So these three tests, bitter, umami, and sweet, is G protein coupled test receptors. Then sour and salty. You can see sour, hydrogen ion. What it does? Sour blocks potassium channels. Sour blocks the potassium channel and enhances through the sodium channel, that is amyloid sensitive sodium channels, and the calcium also comes inside, and calcium channels opens up and the test sensitivity. So the hydrogen ion, first thing it does, it blocks the potassium channel, enhances the sodium in, and enhances the calcium to come in, and that is how the depolarization starts. And the salt, where the sodium is there, sodium and chloride remains in the same thing. Both have receptors for folate papilla. These two receptors, sour and the salty, are only in folate papilla, the side of the tongue. Salt is usually in anterolateral margin. Sour is usually in posterolateral margin. This is how you see the taste buds. So this is what we talked about. So two, sour and salty are ion gated. That's the G protein receptors. So this is what we talked about. We'll stop here. It's almost 40 minutes, I know. And we'll talk about next time about the eyelid. Salivary gland will start and end with the lacrimal gland. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.